Okay, so magandang araw sa lahat. So ito yung first lesson natin which is about functions. So basically, i-review lang natin yung mga malamang ay natutunan na ninyo noong senior high school tungkol sa functions. So, i-discuss natin, i-recall natin yung definition ng functions, tsaka domain and range, and then uh, i-discuss din natin yung ilang mga special types of functions na madalas ay may encounter natin. So, yun yung polynomial functions, rational functions, radical functions, the absolute value function, uh, ilang klase ng step functions, at tsaka yung mga sinasabing piecewise defined functions. I-discuss din natin yung operations on functions, odd and even functions, at inverse of a function. So, recall natin. So, before we start, we're going to be working on functions of real numbers. So, kailangan familiar tayo dun sa notation na ginagamit sa ilang mga special sets of real numbers. So, una, meron tayong natural numbers. So, these are just the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then, we have the whole numbers. So, itong set of whole numbers, if you notice, this is just the set of natural numbers together with the number 0. So, meron tayong special notations for these sets of numbers. So, itong natural numbers, if I'm going to write this, so in handwritten form, ganito yung itsura niya. Ito namang whole numbers, ganito. And then we have the set of integers. Okay, so these are the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, andito yung mga whole numbers natin. And then, kasama nila yung mga negative versions ng mga natural numbers natin. So, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And if you're going to write it, so in handwritten form, ganito yung itsura niya. And then we have the rational numbers. Okay? So, from the word ratio, which is basically quotient, so itong rational numbers natin, denoted by this, the letter Q. So, these are just a set of fractions. So, fractions, meron tayong numerator and denominator. The numerator is an integer and the denominator is also an integer. Of course, hindi siya dapat maging 0. Otherwise, magiging undefined yung fraction natin. So, in handwritten form, ito yung itsura niya. Okay? So, for example, your the number 2/3 is a rational number. Negative 40/17 is also a rational number. Any integer, for example, 100 is a rational number because we can write 100 as 100/1. And then we have the irrational numbers. So we have two notations for that. We either write q prime or q with the letter c. We read this as ito q prime, ito naman q complement. Okay. So you can use either notation. Okay. So this will be so the irrational numbers are the numbers that you cannot write as a fraction. Okay. So hindi nyo siya pwedeng masulat as p over q. So examples of irrational numbers are examples of irrational numbers. You have your pi, you have the constant e, and then square roots ng mga numbers na hindi perfect square. Square root of 2, for example, square root of 3, cube root of 2, and etc. So these are irrational numbers. Now, if we combine the rational numbers and the irrational numbers, we will have the real numbers. So parang may ganito silang relationship. So yung R natin, real numbers, nahati siya sa dalawa, yung rational and then yung irrational numbers. So nasa loob ng rational numbers natin yung mga integers. Nasa loob ng integers yung whole numbers. And then nasa loob ng whole numbers yung natural numbers. Maybe let me redraw this diagram. So again, ito, I'll start with R. And then we have the rational and irrational numbers sa loob ng, so again, sa loob ng rational, nandun yung mga integers. And then sa loob ng integers, nandun yung whole numbers. And then sa loob ng whole numbers, nandun yung mga natural numbers natin. Okay. So another thing, so I hope you're familiar with these notations. So these are notations for intervals of real numbers. Okay. So parang shortcut lang siya sa pagsulat nitong mga inequalities na to. So let's start with this inequality. Ito. So A is less than X is less than B. So ibig sabihin lang nito mga numbers na nasa pagitan ng A at B. Pero hindi kasama yung A at B. So we write it this way. So parenthesis A, comma B, parenthesis. Okay. So of course, ang basa natin dito is yung open interval. This is the open interval A, B. Ngayon, kung gusto nating isama yung A dun sa interval natin, ang gagawin lang natin, yung parenthesis dito sa first, papalitan natin ng square brackets. So similarly, kung gusto nating isama yung B, itong B, ito naman nga yung kanang parenthesis, yung papalitan natin ng square brackets. So kung gusto natin kasama yung A tsaka B, so ano yung inequality natin? A is less than or equal to X, less than or equal to B. So ito ngayon yung notation natin. So ang tawag natin dito ay, this is the closed interval AB. So for the inequality X is greater than A naman, so ito yung notation natin. This is also an open interval. This is the open interval A positive infinity. So open interval din ito. Okay. So I think na-gets nyo na yung convention itong notation na to. Kung gusto nyo isama yung A, so if you want A is greater than or X is greater than or equal to A, and then papalitan nyo lang yung parenthesis ng square brackets. Okay. Now, for the inequality X is less than A, we have the closed interval negative infinity to A. I'm sorry, open interval. Open interval. And so if you want to include A, so X is less than or equal to A, papalitan lang natin yung parenthesis ng closed, ng square brackets. Okay. So sometimes yung set R, sinusulat din siya as the open interval from negative infinity to positive infinity. So note, sometimes hindi na natin sinusulat yung positive infinity for positive infinity, yung positive sign for positive infinity. Okay. So kung gusto nyong mas simple yung notation, pwede nyong isulat lang siya as infinity. Okay. So those are, so we have the sets of real numbers, and we have the intervals of real numbers, and now we can define function. Okay. So let's look at this definition line by line. So I'm going to start with A and B. So let A and B be non-empty sets. So halimbawa, ito yung A ko. And then, ito naman yung B. And I want to define a function from A to B. So, non-empty ito. So, may mga laman itong sets na to. Yan. So, a function, f, from A to B. So, it's a rule that assigns to each element in A unique element in B. Okay. So if we have that function, we write it this way. So this is the notation for f being a function. So let f be a function from A to B. So according to this definition, yung function na f, it will be a rule that assigns to each element in A. So bawat element ng A, we have to assign it with a unique element in B. So, the keywords here are each. So, each element in A. So, lahat ng mga elements ng A, meron dapat kapartner sa B. So, ilan yung partner ng bawat element ng A? Isa lang. So, dapat unique. So, I'm going to draw one possible assignment or rule. So, pwedeng ito, I will assign that to this element. So, hindi ko siya pwedeng i-assign sa isa pang element. So, kapag ganito, hindi na siya function. Okay? And then, ito naman. Ito rin. And then, this one, pwede ko siyang i-partner dito. So, okay lang na yung mga partner, yung mga elements ng B, meron silang more than one partner from the set A. Pero, yung mga elements ng A, dapat tag-isa lang sila ng partner sa set B. Okay. So, if I have an element called, let's call it small letter A. So, ito yung, kunwari yung A, small letter A. Inassign ko siya sa small letter B, which is this element. Okay. Then, I write it like this. F of A is equal to B. Okay. Okay. So, the set A is called the domain of F. Okay. So, ito yung domain. And then, the set B, ito yun, is the co-domain. So, meron tayong notation for domain and codomain. Ito yung notation natin for domain. Ito yung notation natin for codomain. So, for this particular function, yung domain natin is the set A. The co-domain is the set B. Okay. Now, the set of all resulting values of F is called the range of F. So, ano ibig sabihin nun? So, in the process of creating this function, pinartner natin lahat ng elements ng A with a unique element in B. Okay. So, lahat ng elements ng B na may partner from A, it will be part of the range. So, in this particular in this way that I assign the elements of A with elements in B, yung range natin is the entire set B. Yeah. Pero okay lang din na merong elements ng codomain na walang partner from A. So, if sa pangalanan natin itong mga elements natin, halimbawa this is element C, this is D, and this is E. So, yung codomain natin will be the entire set B. Okay. So, that is, it will be the set containing B, C, D, and E. Pero dahil tong E na to, wala siyang kapartner sa A. Hindi siya part ng range. So, ano lang yung range natin? what are the elements of the range? So the range consists of elements B, C, and D. Okay. So again, yung domain natin is laging yung first set. Yung codomain, it will be the second set, yung set of target elements. Okay? And then yung range will be the result of the set of resulting values. So lahat nung elements ng codomain na may partner from the domain. Okay. Okay. So let's look at an example. Okay. So let f be the function from the set of real numbers to the set of real numbers. So it's defined by f of x is equal to x squared. So find the domain, codomain, and the range of f. Okay. So from the definition, the domain and codomains are already given. Ito yun. Ito yung domain, ito yung codomain. So the domain of f is the set of real numbers, and the codomain is also the set of real numbers. Okay. Now, what is the range? Okay. So the range again is not necessarily equal to the codomain. Okay. So when we look at the range, we ask ourselves, ano yung magiging resulta nitong function? So itong function natin, x squared. Ini-square niya lahat ng mga number. So, for example, 0 squared is 0. 2 squared is equal to 4. Negative 2 squared is also equal to 4. So, ang magiging resulta ng function na to ay mga numbers na either 0 or positive. So, mga non-negative numbers. So, kung ito yung real line ko, ito yung 0, ito lang yung magiging part ng range ko. So, starting from 0, and then all the positive real numbers. So, these are numbers which are greater than or equal to 0. And using the interval notation that we had earlier, I can write the range as the interval from 0 to positive infinity. Okay. Now, in this case, madali lang malaman kung ano yung domain tsaka codomain. Kasi, nakaspecify siya mismo nung dinefine yung function. Yan. Ito yung domain, ito yung codomain. But sometimes, or oftentimes rather, hindi naka-specify ito. Instead, diretso tayo dun sa formula nung function. So, halimbawa, x cubed plus x plus 1. Okay. So, if the function is defined as a formula and the domain and codomains are not given, ano ngayon yung domain? So, to answer that question, we will introduce the concept of the natural domain. So, the natural domain of a function is the largest subset of R in which the function is defined. Okay. So, from here onwards, when we mean natural domain, we will just call that the domain. Okay. So, especially when the domain is not explicitly stated. So, kung meron tayong function, paano natin malalaman yung domain? So, ang itatanong lang natin sarili natin, ano yung mga pwede kong ilagay or ipalit na x dito? So, the domain now is the set of all x. for which the function is defined. So set of all allowable x. Okay. So what are the cases when the function is not defined? So kung meron siyang denominator, hindi dapat maging 0 yung denominator. So that's an example. Okay, but let's look at some examples. So kailangan defined yung function. So let's look at these examples. So find the domain and range of the following. So we have f of x. So let's start with f of x equals square root of x. Ano yung mga x na pwede nating ilagay dito? So we have a square root. And in the set of real numbers, we can only take the square root of non-negative numbers. So we cannot take the square root of a negative number. So therefore, the domain of f is the interval 0 to positive infinity. So again, bakit? Because the square root cannot accept negative numbers. So ano ngayon yung range naman nitong function? Well, what's the smallest possible value of f? If x is 0, then the square root of 0 is 0. So square root of 0 is equal to 0. Square root of 1 is equal to 1. Square root of 100 is equal to 10. So as you can see, habang lumalaki yung x na nilalagay natin sa loob ng function, lumalaki din yung square root niya. Okay. So wala siyang limit. Pwedeng lumaki to ng lumaki. It's just that yung meron tayong smallest value, which is 0. So therefore, the range is the interval 0 to positive infinity. Now let's look at g of x. So g of x is equal to square root of x minus 1. So katulad lang to nung number 1, except that yung nasa loob nung radical natin ay x minus 1. So kailangan, dun sa f natin, dapat yung x natin greater than or equal to 0 para makuna natin siya ng square root. So similarly, itong square root of x minus 1 naman, dapat yung x minus 1 greater than or equal to 0. And this inequality is equivalent to x is greater than or equal to positive 1, which is just the interval 1 to positive infinity. So therefore, the domain of g is the interval 1 to positive infinity. Ano ngayon yung range niya? Okay. So if x is 1, I have 1 minus 1, which is 0. So square root of 0 is 0. If x is 2, I have square root of 2 minus 1, which is 1. If x is 101, I have square root of 101 minus 1, which is square root of 100. So katulad siya ng square root of x, lalaki ng lalaki siya, pero ang pinakamaliit na value niya ay 0. So therefore, the range is 0, positive infinity. Okay? So next we have h of x. So wala tayong radical, pero meron tayong denominator na x minus 2. So itong function na to, hindi lang siya define kapag 0 yung denominator natin. At mangyayari lang yan kapag ang x ay equal sa 2. So therefore, yung domain natin, domain of h, is the set of real numbers. Pero kailangan alisin ko yung 2. Kasi kung 2 yan, magiging 1 over 2 minus 2, which is not defined. So to remove the number 2 from R, ito yung notation natin, I have a backslash, which signifies that I am removing something from R. And then I will put inside the set the number which I want to remove, which in this case is 2. So that's the domain. Now, what is the range of this function? Okay. So, what do you think is the range of this function? So, meron tayong rational function dito. So, if you have rational functions, usually we're expecting asymptotes. But, so right now, we don't really have the machinery to actually find the range. So we're going to park this for now because later we will discuss rational functions. Okay, so next we have r of x is equal to 1 over square root of x minus 2. Okay, so meron tayong denominator at the same time yung denominator natin merong radical. Okay, so two conditions para maging defined itong function na to. Dapat yung denominator natin hindi 0. So x minus 2 should not be 0. At the same time, yung nasa loob ng radical natin, dapat hindi siya negative. So x minus 2 should be greater than or equal to 0. If you combine these two, you will get x. So if you combine these two conditions, you will get x minus 2 is greater than 0. So bakit? Well, itong pangalawang inequality natin na x minus 2 is greater than or equal to 0. Kasama dyan yung 0. Okay. Pero dun sa first condition natin, hindi kasama yung 0. So, ang gagawin natin, aalisin lang natin yung 0. So, magiging siyang x minus 2 is greater than 0. So, therefore, the domain of R is the set x minus 2 is greater, the set of all x where x minus 2 is greater than 0 or x is greater than 2. So that's the open interval from 2 to positive infinity. So i-park din natin yung range ng R, and later on we will discuss how to get the range of these kinds of functions.